Thank you, IWSA, for giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge with all of you. I also want to thank my niece Purva, who helped me with my slides. Climate change is considered an existential threat to civilization because it is having such extremes of temperature, which we have never seen in the last century, which is happening now in this century. And that extremes of climate are affecting millions of people around the world. But the most affected people are the poorest, most vulnerable populations in every society. So in this era of climate change, equity becomes extremely important. And I'm going to talk to you about what humans can do. Humans created this problem of extreme temperatures, extreme climates, and then we have to solve it. So my talk will focus on what citizens can do to prevent further degradation of our environment and mitigation of effects to prevent further degradation. And we can do this by a few things. I will share my slides here. So the two things we all have to do is putting public interest over narrow self-interests and doing our duties and fulfilling our responsibilities to our environment. One of the 5 duties I will mention in my talk. And the third thing I forgot is helping others who are in need in our communities. They are hurt the most with climate change, and we should give them a helping hand in whatever way we can. Just being aware of how the poor are doing in our community and helping them with our time, talent, and treasure. I will give examples of people in India who have done these kinds of things in the past. And I will end with telling you what I am doing myself so that, you can see if I can do it, everybody else can do it. All it needs is a passion to do something about what is happening in our society and helping others. And the Prime Minister Modi has put 5 commitments after his visit to Glasgow in November last year for the UN conference of parties. He mentioned 5 things. One is, he calls it Panchamrit, 500 gigawatts of green energy by 2030, 50% of total energy by green energy by 2030, reduction of 1 billion tons of carbon, reduce carbon emission intensity by 45%, net zero emission by 2070. And through all these, energy efficiency is an extremely important thing we all have to understand, and each citizen can be energy efficient. The concept of duty is ingrained in our dharma. With this concept, you do what has to be done, not expecting a particular result at a particular time. We will get what we deserve, is what our Shastras tell us. And by doing this, we get peace of mind, and then we can just feel good that we have done our part in society. And in the US, there are several things being done along these lines, which I just want to tell you a quick glimpse of that, because since 2021, we have rejoined the Paris Agreement, and we're doing our part to fund projects around the world which will mitigate climate change, which will minimize climate change, climate extremes. And the Department of Energy in the US has created what is called Justice 40 program, where 40% of all benefits of government spending should go to disadvantaged communities. And which are these disadvantaged communities? Low income, high unemployment, racially and ethnically segregated, and distressed neighborhoods. So this
Excuse me, Dr. Rajaram, your slides are not moving, I think.
I just want to give a framework before I get into my slides.
Okay, you have not moved it. We were just wondering. Yeah.
No, okay. And so this is what, the US is trying to take a leadership in saying equity is extremely important in what we do to impact climate change. With that, I will start my slides. We hear the word climate change and immediately, we think, we are seeing it all the time. And many humans deny it. Others will forcefully say it's our obligation to prevent and mitigate the effects of climate change. There are two schools of thought, but finally, after several global conferences convened by the United Nations, over 180 countries have agreed to take action to manage climate change. And the basis for all this was the work done by IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, which was headed by Rajendra Pachauri of Terry for many years. And he and Al Gore got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 for their work. At the Earth Summit in 1992, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was created to coordinate global efforts to combat climate change and deal with its consequences. What is climate change? I'm glad that India is one of the first countries to recognize the need to combat climate change and change the name of the Ministry of Environment and Forest to add climate change. According to Mary Robinson, the month of March 2017 represented the 627th month in a row of warmer than normal temperatures. In 2015, the Middle East and the Persian Gulf registered record temperatures as high as 73 degrees centigrade. And this can happen in India if we don't do what Prime Ministers has set as our goal. Many people died in their homes in Chicago a few years ago. And these were the old and poor people who did not have working air conditioners in their homes. Damage to property and loss of life in India has been horrific due to climate extremes the past several years. Impacts of climate change. What does climate change, these extreme weather events do? Unbearable heat in our cities and rural areas. The last 10 years, we have witnessed hotter temperatures than ever before, the hottest year being 2016. Many people died in Europe, US, and India. Extreme floods, which we never anticipated or designed for. The frequency of floods is increasing. In New Jersey recently, 25 people died, where we pride ourselves in our infrastructure that is planned for all kinds of emergencies. But climate was so extreme that 25 people died. We were overwhelmed by it. Extreme drought has impacted food production and created farmer suicides in India. Extreme wildfires lasting for longer than ever before and causing damage. We see that in the US, Australia, and other countries. What is being done about climate change? This agreement was signed by 190 countries in 2015. The world was very hopeful that we can keep the temperatures to under 1.5 degrees centigrade. However, things changed drastically in 2017 when the United States elected a new president who did not believe in climate change and wanted to reverse the action by his predecessor. Then the COVID pandemic hit in 2020. All the financial commitments made by rich countries to help the developing world were forgotten. However, the slowdown of economic activity during the pandemic showed that humans can slow down the emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. We have to learn from the pandemic and rethink our development models. What happened since Paris? It's shown that we cannot depend on governments alone to do the hard work required to stop and reverse the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We all have to reduce our carbon footprint. We can slow down the emissions of greenhouse gases by consuming less and leading a simple life, which happened in lockdowns. Young people can take the lead, and this will be listened to by the business leaders who need young people to buy their products for them to survive in business. A young Swedish girl Greta Thunberg, mobilized the whole world. And she practiced what she preached by traveling by boat to the US instead of by air. The United Nations and other leaders have paid attention to her calls for slowing down greenhouse gases. And we saw other young leaders at the 2021 Glasgow conference. So why is equity so important when it comes to climate change? Equity is defined as a quality of being fair and impartial. When it comes to equity in climate change, the following two terms are very important to consider. Climate justice. This was defined by Mary Robinson, past president of Ireland, UN Secretary General for climate change, putting people at the heart of the solution. The fight against climate change is fundamentally about human rights and securing justice for those suffering the most from its impact. Vulnerable communities and communities that did not create the problem are suffering the most. Environmental justice, the fair and equitable distribution of environmental benefits and burdens of economic development in communities. Like I told you about US, the Justice 40 campaign here. I've been in the US for 51 years and I've repeatedly seen environmentally hazardous industries and facilities to dispose waste located in the poorest communities. The communities are told about the jobs that will be created, and then all the resulting health impacts are hidden. And a poor community in the south side of Chicago was selected for hazardous waste incinerator. People protested vehemently and the company had to shut it down. I was at the Balaswa landfill a few years ago in Delhi. I walked on it. And when I saw from there, the slum communities in the area were getting all the hazardous waste, the leachate from that landfill, the hazardous smoke. And why do people who are poor have to live in such communities? Because we who can take action have just keep throwing the garbage, and that created all these huge landfills instead of recycling as much as we can. Sharon Burrow, past president of Australian Educational Union and Australian Council of Trade Unions, said, teaching taught me humility and exposed the inequalities of our world. She said the policy structure of human rights and justice is international. If you remember these words in our personal and professional lives, we will pay attention to the inequalities in the world and work towards climate justice and environmental justice. I work with DNA Life in Bangalore that is working with farmers in Western Karnataka to improve their livelihoods through afforestation and restoring the water resources in the area. This is helping the restoration of wildlife habitats and biodiversity. It's one of the most diverse areas in India, in the Western Ghats. So there are groups doing it, but more of a climate change has to be citizen-driven. Governments react to demands of citizens. We have seen many movements in India, led by women that have changed the policies of the government. Such movements or andolans reach out to the citizens to take action. These impact the action of industry and government agencies. The famous andolans in India, among others, are Narmada Bachao Andolan by Medha Patkar in 1985. And that has, made the government rethink the development of the Narmada River and the number of people affected by flooding from the dams that they are building. The Chipko Andolan in 1973, one of the first, which is recognized internationally, in Uttarakhand by women who surrounded the trees and prevented indiscriminate logging by companies. Sundarlal Bahugana took this and made it a national movement. Lawyers in India have driven the environmental policies and environmental protection for many years. It can be done even now by women and other citizens who care for equity and environment. Other examples, the person I respect a lot is MC Mehta, a lawyer in Delhi who brought public interest litigation to the Indian Supreme Court in the 1980s and 90s to protect the Taj Mahal from air pollution from industry, prevent Ganga pollution and getting lead-free petrol in India. He has fought many cases to protect the vulnerable people affected by industrial pollution. Pushpa Hingorani is considered the mother of PILs in India. She brought a case in support of prisoners who were ill-treated by the jails. Justice Bhagwati is considered the father of PILs since he allowed PILs in the Supreme Court starting in 1985. And that has really become a trend now. Any citizen, any lawyer, any citizen can bring it with help of lawyers, and the Supreme Court has to listen to the just PILs. What can a citizen do to ensure equity? I heard this talk by 14-year-old Vinisha Umashankar of Tamil Nadu last year. And she just impressed me with the maturity and concerns she had. She spoke about a solar clothes press that she had designed and built a prototype with funds from the National Innovation Center. She said the poor people who provide this service are subject to the fumes from coal in their irons and work all day, reducing their lives and having poor health. She made a light electric iron that runs on solar power provided from the roof of a cart that the person uses to press the clothes. She was invited by Prince Henry to Glasgow, and she gave a stirring talk there in Glasgow. I have not spoken to Vinisha, but based on my upbringing in India, let me share my thoughts. What would have motivated Vinisha? First is concern for fellow human beings. When I was 7 years old, I was told by my grandmother, service to humanity is service to God. The phrase stuck in my head, and I have spent the last 27 years thinking about the poor in Chicago and India. I've looked for opportunities to serve. The opportunities I found are simply unimaginable. I'm convinced that if you want to serve others, opportunities are everywhere. But you have to have that mindset. Stop thinking just about you and your family, but think outward. Our duties as a citizen. Our scripture suggests 5 duties, which we learn from a young age. Duty to parents, duty to your teachers, duty to fellow humans, duty to the environment, and duty to family. We'll touch on these a little bit further. Duties to your parents. You are taught when you're growing up, Mata, Pita, Guru, Daiva. So I listened to my parents when I was young and achieved my goals in life. When my father told me, he'd be proud if I completed my PhD, I was determined to achieve it. It took me several years to do this, but it made me happy to make him proud. I've been fortunate to have them over the US and serve them. So one should do what one can help to help parents in their years of need. Duty to your teachers. Teachers lay the foundation for your success from first grade to college and beyond. I still remember the values they taught me, and the values have guided me since. I was fortunate to meet my elementary school teachers after many years in the US, and the teachers were happy to see me when I went back to Second Duties to your fellow humans. This is extremely important in the era of climate change. So it's our duty to give back to our community, and we can do this in several ways. What I have been trying to do is tutoring and mentoring young students from the inner city of Chicago. These students were poor families that had no role model in their lives. I spent 2 hours every week for several years working with underprivileged children to tutor them after school and stay involved through mentoring till they completed high school and went to college. I've been fortunate to get involved with the Greater Chicago Food Depository that feeds 800,000 hungry people in our city every year. I work with a lot of NGOs in India working on poverty alleviation. Duty to the environment. God has given us clean air, water, among the 5 elements that make up the planet. It is our responsibility to ensure that the environment is preserved in the condition that we got it, or improve upon it for our children, grandchildren. Gandhiji said this, gave this message to us many, many, many years ago. How do I do this? By having solar power in my house, conserving water, ensure I work on preventing water pollution, driving a small fuel-efficient car, and being energy efficient throughout my life. Duty to family. This is one thing we all do, but we limit it to our nuclear family. The definition of family has to be expanded to include your relatives who are in need and the poor people in your community. Inculcating values in our children so that they understand their civic responsibilities and other duties mentioned earlier. What can you do in your community? There are many things you can do in your community. They're an example for others to follow. I will elaborate on these, giving my personal examples later. But here are a few things anyone can do. Implement rainwater harvesting and other water-saving measures in your home to reduce your water and carbon footprint. Do not use plastic water bottles and contribute to ever-growing plastic waste. I heard of a gentleman in Mumbai who just volunteered to go home to home and say, can I help you? Do you have a leak in your home? You need tap. I'll come and fix it for you at no cost. So this is the kind of public service. Because every tap that wastes water is just water not available to the poor people who, especially in rural communities, who walk a long distance to get water. And that too, they don't know the quality of that water. So this is the kind of thing we start right at our home. And rainwater harvesting systems are so abundant in India. It can be done. It is being done in every city in India. But I know people in Bangalore who do not take any drop of water from the city because they have implemented a wonderful rainwater harvesting system, collect the water that they need, and the rest, they just recharge the groundwater. Choose products with less packaging, because packaging uses a lot of valuable cardboard and plastic. Plastics are hard to recycle and cause a lot of damage to our environment. We have seen this in our oceans where they just finally end up through in our small water body, goes to a river goes to the ocean. And we have seen wonderful animals like whales, seals being killed with this plastic. Cardboard uses pulp from trees, and we cannot afford to lose our forest cover in India. Reuse things and recycle all waste. I remember when I was growing up in India, we used to reuse a newspaper 6-7 times for different purposes. And then finally called the Raddiwala, gave him the paper that if he properly recycled, we got some small things, trinkets for that. So that culture is there in India, but we have forgotten about it by becoming more a consumer society, copying the West instead of keeping our old values intact. Plant trees in your community. They reduce the temperature and help with flooding. It makes your environment livable. Our cities are losing a lot of tree cover, as I've seen in Bangalore. So this is simple things we can do. Like in our company in Chicago, we used to have one day in the summer where every employee would be asked to go to the local parks, where I have picked up waste in the park and any waste that has ended up in a river close by, or also plant a couple of trees. And one company donated lots of trees. They needed people to actually plant them, so we did the planting. That whole day spent helping improve the community was the most pleasurable one for me. At the end of the day, I felt I've done something for my community. So we all can do it. We all can find a little bit of time. It's a question of priority. If you make it a priority, time comes and you can do it. The things you can do to help the needy in your community. Volunteer in your community for at least 2 hours every week, depending on your area of interest. And that again, even in our busy lives, with all the commuting, we do everything, is possible. If we say it is important for me, for my own mental health, for my own peace of mind, that I have helped somebody that week. Work in a food bank or temple that serves food to the needy. The poor need access to nutritious food, good education, and basic things like adequate clothing and shelter. Do what you can to help. And I know several NGOs in India doing this kind of work. There's a group in Bangalore called Goonj. They collect all kinds of clothing, blankets, other things needed by the poor from people who want to donate, and then make sure it's properly distributed to the people in need. Giving comes in 3 ways. Your time is very important to give. Talent, easy to give. And treasure, depending on your ability. But I suggest up to 10% of your income. When I was still in school, my father told me, as soon as you start working, 2% of your money is not yours, right from the first day. And then keep on increasing it as your ability, as your income grows. So for the last 20, 25 years, 10% of my income, I don't consider it as mine. I just give it to charities, some in the US, some in India. Spend time with the elderly and frail, either in your home or community. I am with the Lions Club in Chicago, where we adopt to elderly couple here in Chicago, and we do groceries for them or collect groceries and deliver it to them. So these are things we can do if there is a will. And there are so many service organizations in our communities. Just join one of them. Or if you're too passionate, start one on your own if you don't find something that you can really get involved in. So all these things are things one can do. And there are examples and examples. There are wonderful people doing this. That's why under all these pressures of climate change and poverty in India, we are still, surviving. And a few years ago, one of my friends said, Raj, I want to go and help rural India. Can you help me gather at least 30 NRIs so that I can take them to rural India and show them the problems there? So with help of another friend, I sent out emails to thousands of people, and 30 people volunteered. And my friend from Minneapolis chartered a whole trip from Chennai to Kanyakumari for 10 days on a bus with them staying every night in a village, spending half the day there, the night there, and then going to the next village. And when these 30 NRIs came back, I held a conference here so they could share their insights with others. And one doctor came back to me and said, Raj, I learned more from those villages than I ever knew. And she is a doctor who got her medical education in Mumbai, successful in the US. And they could see the happiness in the face of these villagers. Whatever little they had, they shared with them, made sure that they were comfortable. So this is our parampara, and we can do it. We have to make a decision to do it. Hunger alleviation. So those are broad things I told you. But what I did specifically in Chicago, I will tell you, which I put in my book, Golden Giving, that Shamala was. I'm glad she mentioned that. I'm at the head of a food bank. They store all the donated food and distribute efficiently to the people in need in 1994, and toured his warehouse. I was impressed and told him I would volunteer to pack the donated food. It comes in large packages to smaller boxes for distribution to food distribution centers. I enjoyed this a lot. I also gave my largest check every year to them, since I was told Annadanam is the best dhanam. I lead the hunger alleviation project in my Alliance district and help food banks get the equipment they need to distribute the food efficiently. Our club donates money and volunteers at a few food drives in our community. And when I see these kinds of things, I said, why is it not replicated in India? So fortunately, my friend Sam Petroda, who lives in my neighborhood, he has influence when during Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's times, that he said, Raj, I'm working with Mayor Sheila Dikshit in Delhi to start a food bank. So would you want to help? So I said, sure. Then somebody from there was coming to see food depositories in India, how to model it, how to build one in Delhi and other cities. So I took this lady, Vandana, who came to our Chicago food depository, showed her what all is possible here. And then she said, when she went back, said, how can we help? We've got this warehouse donated by DLF, but we need some help to stock it with food, make some changes to store the food, make the changes. So my company in Delhi, we had started Tetra Tech. I called up the manager of the company there. I said, Satish, what can you do? He said, Raj, I will talk to Tetra Tech US. I've talked to them. They said $10,000 of first food donation is from the company, $10,000. And then I will supply my engineers to do all the electrical, mechanical, civil modification to the warehouse. So this is the kind of thing we can do. Now I'm glad to say there are 12 food banks in different cities, and they're expanding and growing. And Vandana Shiva is an amazing woman who is, working full time on expanding this. Education. I'm a firm believer in education, since it has given me all my opportunities in life. My efforts in this area are tutor and mentor underprivileged children in my community. I did this for several years and could see the impact of my 2 hours every week on the children I tutor and mentor. I accepted the leadership of Pratham USA Chicago chapter and raised about $900,000 in 5 years. I built a strong team of volunteers and they raised $1 million in 2021. Pratham USA raises several millions every year to provide elementary education to slum and rural children and provides vocational training to rural youth. We also give girls who drop out a second chance to finish their secondary education. This is something started by Madhav Chavan when he went back after finishing his PhD in the US to Mumbai. He went to the Dharavi slums, saw the need for education there. Children are not getting any education. He went to Women's College in Mumbai, talked to the principal there. They said, we will give you our student teachers to go to the Dharavi slums and teach at whatever time is convenient to those people. So working with the people in the slums, he found a central location where these kids can gather together. They said, we can do that only in the evenings because we need their help during the day. So evenings they would get together, the teachers would be mobilized to go there, spend time with them, 2-3 hours, whatever they could. And then this has now grown into a national movement, international movement. The Pratham USA model, Pratham model is being followed by 10 other countries in Africa, even in Mexico recently. So this is the kind of thing, one gentleman, Madhav Chavan, and he had a lot of help from others, women from this women's college, and Vasudevan Rajaram, who saw this. She featured Pratham in one of her movies, and she's an ambassador. She comes here. And when I took over Pratham leadership in 2010, they told me Anupam Kher is coming to Chicago. So you have to use him and raise money. So I had zero experience in fundraising, but with calling a few friends and going to a banquet hall where I knew the owner, I said, this is for a good cause in India. I said, you are from Uttarakhand. This is what Pratham is doing in Uttarakhand. He says, my banquet hall food is free to do your fundraising. So I just put $200 tickets. 175 people showed up. And one young couple who had paid $1,000 for the two of them, during my pledge drive, they raised their hand and said, we want to contribute $10,000. So like that, I have found some amazing people in Chicago, young people in their 20s who say we have a lot of money. We don't know. We just don't want to be selfish, spend it all on ourselves. We want to give to Pratham. I just called one person out of the blue one December, and I said, I need $15,000, Ketu. Can you help me? He said, come and pick up the check. And that same gentleman gave $200,000 last year. So this is the kind of people are there who are willing to help. But you have to be passionate and ask them for it and show that the impact that their donation is doing, and then they'll be gladly give. They'll be glad to give it. Environment. I started life as a mining engineer in India, continued in the US for 20 years. However, the opportunity to work on wastewater projects in Chicago came in 1998. My company, Midwest Engineers, did tunneling projects for wastewater management. I also had the opportunity to clean up several hazardous waste sites in the US. In 1994, I got the opportunity to work with a large firm in Delhi to introduce wastewater treatment technologies for power plants in India. In 1997, I formed a joint venture with them, formed a Tetra India to expand this work to a range of environmental projects in India. Built a great team of young engineers who are still improving the environment in India. I teach school children and college students about the environment whenever I visit India, whenever I get opportunities in Chicago. Mahatma Gandhi is my hero. He told us we should lead by example instead of just preaching. This had a profound impact on me, and I was able to see, so always seeking the opportunities to serve people and build teams to serve the poor in the US and India. This does two things. First, it helps you become a better person. You have an interesting life while influencing the others around you. It also makes you a lifelong learner. There's nothing that satisfies your soul than helping your fellow human beings. It helps you do your part for equity in our society and learn of the problems facing the poor in our communities. Once you meet them, you find many ways to give your time, talent, and treasure for them to improve their lives. I also ensure that they are stakeholders and learn to help themselves. Whatever water projects I do in India, I make sure that they give their portion, at least 1/3. There's one project we did in Chitikorin, near Chitikorin village there. My friend went there and said, I've evaluated this area. If we had 2 deep reservoirs here, 20 feet deep, they will be completely free of any water shortages. They can even help other communities. So he calculated the cost was about $6,000. He told the villagers, unless they collected $2,000, some in cash, some in sweat equity, we can't proceed. They did that within a month. And then he took them to the village panchayat, and they said, we will match what they have collected. And then he was only $2,000 short. So he came back to the US, called 10 friends, including me, said $200 each. I gave him $200. After 3 months, I see this beautiful 2 reservoirs satisfying the community, and that community is thriving. My cousin who recently came here to visit here in the US said, Raj, that community is the most prosperous community in the whole of that part of Tamil Nadu. So this is what water does, and one person's desire to help the community. Conclusions. Each and every one gets a lot from society, and it is our responsibility to give back to society. This starts in our neighborhood, but does not have to stop there. I have had the opportunity to help in Chicago and in many needy communities in India and Africa. Giving your time, talent, and treasure is good for your conscience and gives true happiness. It keeps you healthy. Your problems appear insignificant when you help others who are not as lucky as you. My source of happiness has been giving smiles to the people I have had the opportunities to serve. If you make giving back a priority, you will find time to do it. This is the excuse I hear from many of my friends, and I tell them that they change their priorities, they can do a lot for the community. So with that, I will stop here, take your questions. I put in a lot of ideas out there, which people can easily practice in their own communities. So questions, please.